Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, everybody's here. Hey
We're
there.
back.
Hey. Someday down the road, I'm going to suggest that we do a recorded podcast instead of a live one, but it's
There you go.
never as much fun as this, right?
That's right. It wouldn't be as half as fun as this.
Sometimes the Zoom works and sometimes it doesn't, and this time it didn't, but at least we're on here now. So,
That's
glad.
right.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to our Sunday night offering of Astronomy Entertainment, the Sunday Night Astronomy Show.
Yay.
My name is Chris Kerwin. I'm the creator of the social media channels known as Astronomy by the Bay. I'm also an amateur astronomer and member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. I'd like to welcome back my two regular co-hosts this evening, Mr. Paul Owen from the Moonshot Observatory in beautiful Hampton. Hey, Paul.
Hello. Good evening.
Evening. And Mr. Mike Powell from the PFO Observatory in St. John. Mike, hi.
Howdy ho.
Hello. And we'd like to welcome back all of you tonight from YouTube and Facebook land. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, well, on tonight's episode of the Sunday Night Astronomy Show, now if you love being under dark skies and you enjoy learning about the cosmos, perhaps you've decided now is the time to become part of the astronomy community, and we would welcome you. After reading many reviews, you make a choice. You set up the equipment and find out something is just not right. As amateur astronomers, we've all been there. I would bet that there are probably thousands of telescopes sitting in closets all over North America right now because people found them too frustrating to overcome. Sometimes it just takes reaching out to someone who has experience to guide you through the problems. After all, stargazing is supposed to be fun. So tonight's guest will help us understand what issues can arise and how to deal with them. Mr. Dave Chapman, aka Professor Telescope, joins us from Nova Scotia this evening. Dave has been an amateur astronomer since the age of 8 and received his first telescope on his 10th birthday. He joined the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada Ottawa Centre in 1968 and later became a life member of the Halifax Centre. He has been librarian, president, vice president, observing chair of that center, man of many hats. Nationally, nationally, he has served on various committees, awards, observing publications. He was the editor of the Rask Observer's Handbook for 2012 to 2016 editions. He received the Simon Newcomb Award in 1986, the Service Award in 2015, and the Fellowship Award in 2020. He has also provided technical editing services for Sky News Magazine, Night Sky Almanac, and several other Rask publications. Now, in 2013, he began a cultural astronomy project called Mi'kmaq Moons with First Nation friend Kathy Lavant. They have presented many presentations and articles, and together they published a hardcover book with Formac Publishing. So tonight, Dave is going to talk to us about his experience messing around with telescopes and the concept of telescope medics. Welcome to the program, Dave. Good to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm not muted, am I?
No, you're here.
I'm very honored to be invited on. I've watched a couple of your shows, and so it seems like a fun thing to do on Sunday nights. So here I am.
That's what we thought. So we're going to get into that topic here in just a second, but also tonight, Final Bud is going to return with another fine binocular target of the week. Paul has another interesting Rosanna's fun fact. Yes.
Yep.
I have a quick look at some photos that you've sent in and a little bit of look at what's coming up this week. So we're going to get started with tonight's program and a chat with Professor Telescope on some telescope medics.
Well, first of all, I feel like you need to step back and show you my T-shirt.
Oh,
it's not working.
that does it with the background sometimes.
Yeah. What does it do? Well, it says happiness can't buy. Let's see. You can't buy happiness, but you can buy a telescope, and it's almost as good.
Yeah. True story.
Yeah. So I put that on special, but yeah, the whole background thing interferes with that. You can sort of see it there.
Yeah, you can see it now. Sure. Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh, then it disappeared. Okay. Okay. Well, yeah. I was invited to come on and wasn't quite sure what to talk about. I've done a lot of different things, but lately I've been involved in helping people fix telescopes and sort telescopes out. So I thought that would be a fun thing to talk about because I haven't really talked about it much. So I do have a few. I don't have a presentation as such, but I do have a few slides I want to share just to kind of get the ball rolling. And then I hope that afterwards we can just have more of a freewheeling discussion and maybe involve some of the viewers as well.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll just go ahead and Uh, I'm trying to share. Can you let me
Oh,
share?
hang on now. There you go. Yeah, we had to reset our Zoom, so we should be good.
Okay. So, did you see that okay?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so that's my that's the little title slide I got here. Um, um, is it still there?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. It says it's paused. Um,
Oh,
can people see my
Yeah,
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 you
I can
can.
see
Yeah,
it.
you're live on YouTube and Facebook right now. With your
okay. Well, anyway, so I'm Professor Telescope, which is just a name I made up for myself. And I invented the concept of the telescope medic. And that came to me when we were planning one of our Nova East Star parties. We're thinking of different activities and different things that we could do. And I said, well, we should have telescope medics. And people would say, well, what's that? You know, what's a telescope medic? And I said, well, just what we should do is just have people identified in the organizers um, to these are people who if somebody has a problem with their telescope, they can just kind of come up to them and ask them, can you give me a hand? So we had like special badges for those people. So that's where the idea of the telescope medic came from. And as far as all the different things I've done, I have a Linktree account which you can see there. And if you want to find out more about all the different projects that I've been involved in, I guess there's a lot to talk about, but I don't want to spend all the time talking about everything. So if you go to my Linktree, you'll be able to, at your leisure, you'll be able to sort of see what I've done, and maybe go down a few rabbit holes to study different aspects of my work, including the Mi'kmaq Moons project and other things. Um, now, for some reason, my screen sharing is paused, and I don't know what to do. So we all have glitches, eh?
Yeah.
No, just hang on. I'll just start it up again
Okay.
if I can. Share this. Okay. Okay, I think I'm good now. Yeah, so my Linktree is there, and if you want to follow up on other things that I've been involved in, I've been an amateur astronomer now for over 60 years. Uh, so there's a lot of history there. So the other thing I wanted to mention was I do have a talk that's on my YouTube channel, and it's called Telescope Tales. And in that talk, I talk about, I kind of lost count. It turns out there are the 11 telescopes that I've owned over the 6 decades, and um, one year I took a bunch of my almost all of my telescopes to Nova East and set them up, and you can see in the picture there all the different ones. So I made a talk about all the different telescopes that I'd had or still have, and their pros and cons, and what I did is I made a YouTube video out of it. Basically, I just ran the slideshow and put a narration on top of it. So that's something that's probably lasts about a half an hour if you want to look into that. But you can find that at my Linktree. That's where I think that's where I came up with the Professor Telescope concept. Um, so I'm just going to show a few highlights. So this isn't the actual telescope that I owned, but I owned a telescope exactly like this. That was my first telescope I got when I was 10 out in Winnipeg. And I had a teacher who would loan me Sky and Telescope magazines, and I would bring them home and pore over them and drool over them. And when I was 10, on my 10th birthday, I got one of these telescopes as my birthday present. And I had been interested in astronomy before that, but this is my first telescope. And it's I found out, I mean, I don't have it anymore, but I figured out that it's a Tasco 5V TE 60 millimeter. And in retrospect, the telescope wasn't actually intended for astronomical use. And some of the giveaways here, it doesn't have a finder scope. It doesn't have any slow motion controls. It didn't have a star diagonal, and it had this crazy erect image eyepiece with it had a click stop zoom. So there were four settings: 15, 30, 45, and 60. So it was an image erecting eyepiece with some kind of variable Barlow in it, I reckon. So the maximum I got out of it was 60 power. Anyway, it got me started. I observed the moon and Jupiter and all kinds of things. And I didn't know any better. I didn't realize it was the wrong kind of telescope. Maybe my parents didn't, but it was fine. It gave me good views. I have a logbook with drawings that of the moon that I took in that telescope, and they stand up. So we have a task. I mean, Tasco is a kind of a bad name these days, but back then they made good telescopes. I don't know if other people have that experience with the older ones, but yeah. So here's another highlight. I'm jumping forward a long, long time here, but after the an International Year of Astronomy, they came out with this Galileoscope, which was a kit telescope that came in a box that you could assemble, and you'd kind of assemble and put together and then look through it. And they cost at the time not very much. If you bought them in bulk, they cost about, like, I remember buying a bunch of them personally. St. Mary's bought like hundreds of them, and I said, well, I'll buy 10, and I think they were like $12.50 each. And I still have unopened boxes of these telescopes. But I went down in the year later, I went down to Cuba, and I was doing some volunteer work down there, and I persuaded St. Mary's to give me 2 boxes of these telescopes. There were 6 in a box, and I had 2 boxes, and I took them down there to distribute to the Cuban amateur astronomers. There's a bit of a story about how they wouldn't let me come in with them at first, but it all turned out well in the end. But they confiscated my 2 boxes because it was pretty obvious I was importing something and I didn't have the right paperwork. But we eventually got them into the hands of the Cubans. But what they didn't care about was I had one in my luggage that wasn't in a box. It was just and so we had all this grand design of doing all these workshops and getting kids to put telescopes together, but I only had one. But we put on these events and we would have all the parts. And what we did was we would get all the kids in the room, and we would invite a couple of kids up at a time, and they would put together a lens, or they they'd put the lens in the tube, or we sort of did it bit by bit. And then at the end, and the central picture there, they would set it up on a tripod and look out the window and look at something across the way. And there's another picture there where I didn't have the right visa. I was supposed to go to a school and work with the kids in a school, but they decided I didn't have the right visa. I had a tourist visa, and I should have had something else. And so my friend Alejandro there, the guy with the mustache, we went over to the school. We said, sorry, we can't come in because he doesn't have the right visa. And the teacher said, well, what if we bring the kids out and go across the street and do it in the park? So they came out of the school, and we just set up in the park, and we did our little session outside, and we did it all there. And then after they were done, another teacher came out and said, can I bring my kids out? So we did 2 classes. So it was quite adventure. It was quite an adventure, I must say. And anyway, that was a fun thing to do. And I haven't done any work like that with them for quite a while, but there was a few years there in a row where we did a lot of volunteer work with the Cuban astronomers, and I wrote those up in the Journal of the RASC, if anybody wants to read about them. I think there were 4 or 5 reports I did that are published in there. Anyway, I got into this whole business of fixing people's telescopes. I didn't set out to do it, but people would start coming to me and say, well, I've got this telescope and it doesn't quite work, and can you help? So this is a friend of the family, friends of ours had this telescope. It was came out in 1969. It was this cardboard tube, long, f10 3-inch reflector, and they'd had this thing in the family for quite a while, and they said, it looks like it needs help. So I took it from them, and one of the problems was that the mirror coatings were all corroded and crappy. And somehow I managed to contact, there's a guy who lives up in around Sudbury who does mirror coatings. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. Maybe someone else can, but you can send your mirror to him and he'll coat it. And I wrote to him and I said, well, I got this little 3-inch telescope. And he says, well, send it to me and I'll just stick it in when I'm doing a bigger one. And all I had to do was pay for the shipping. He didn't charge me for the actual coating, but I got the main mirror and the secondary recoated brand new. And then I put it all back together and collimated it and did a few other things and gave it back to the family. And so that was in 2013. And so now 3 generations of that family have used that telescope. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. You look at the picture there, you can see there's, I came up with some things again from the hardware store. There's some cable ties there with thumb screws on there. That's all new. And not sure about that eyepiece. That might be a new eyepiece. And I came up with a system for mounting the finder, which involved cutting a piece of PVC pipe in half and kind of putting it back together. And so that was my invention there. And it's actually you can see there's little adjustment screws and everything for lining it up. And you know what? That thing actually has kind of an equatorial mount because it's mounted on an angle. It's sort of kind of some generic, 40-degree or something. It's almost an equatorial mount. Anyway, down at the bottom there is a picture I took with my iPhone. I think it was my iPhone. Through the lens of the moon. I mean, it gave a pretty good view. So
Not bad at all.
no, I was pretty happy with it. So that was one of the first projects I got involved in, helping people out. But how it really started was during International Year of Astronomy, when we were doing all these different public outreach events. I was doing the advertising and promotion for it. And I started putting in, every time we had like a little talk or a little meeting, I started putting in this thing at the end. Oh, if you've got a sick telescope, bring it along and we'll see if we can help you with it. And so I started putting these notices in, and people started bringing their telescopes. And at first I thought, oh my God, can we actually do this? Is this going to work, or are we biting off more than we could chew? But what I found was people would bring you a telescope, and 9 times out of 10, it was something super easy that you could fix or tell them about right away. And so I got quite confident at telling people, yeah, I can fix your telescope or help you with your telescope, because you're talking about people who know zero about astronomy, know zero about telescopes. They get a telescope with all the greatest intentions of seeing all these wonderful views. And then they take it home. I mean, you've all heard this story. They take it home and they try to do something with it. They can't figure it out. They get frustrated. They stick it in a closet, Anyway, so I came along and said, hey, if you've got a telescope that doesn't work for you, just bring it along and I'll help you with it. And I started helping people out with their telescope. I mean, one of them was it was one of these telescopes, it had a dust cap on it, but then it had this central cap as well in the middle. You've seen those dust caps, and then there's one in the middle.
Yeah.
But it was a Newtonian type telescope. So the central dust cap was right over the secondary. Anyway, these people were trying to see stuff through the telescope. They couldn't, we can't see anything. And I said, well, show me how you use it. And they said, well, we look through here. They take off the dust cap. I said, no, you're supposed to take off the big one. Not the little one. Take off the big one. They go, oh, you're supposed to take off that, So that was like 30 seconds in with those people. 30 seconds in, I solved their problem because they just didn't know, right? Why Celestron thought it was a good idea to put a tiny central dust cap in the middle of a telescope with a central obstruction, I have no idea. It makes no sense. I mean, if it's a good idea if you offset it, you know, to a place where there's no obstruction, but to have it central, I mean, I just like what brainiac at Celestron thought that was a good idea?
Mhm.
You know, so like they make really good stuff, but sometimes they don't. So a lot of the time you're helping people out with these kind of funny little problems. And I just kind of kept going with that. And eventually, I guess, I know my name got around. People would say, people would phone up like Atlantic Photo Supply would, and they'd say, hey, I'm having trouble with my telescope. Can you help me? And the people at Atlantic Photo Supply would say, no, we don't have anybody here that can do that, but phone Dave Chapman. So I'd get these calls from people. Hey, I got this telescope. Can you help me? And I say, yeah, bring it over. And I've kind of lost count. I probably should have kept record of all the people I helped, but I kind of lost count now. But it's been, you know, dozens of people that I've helped with getting their telescope. Normally, it's like we can't see anything through this telescope, and in the end, they go away and they can see something. So to me, that's a win. Even if the telescope's not the greatest telescope on Earth, at least they're seeing something through it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that this is the one I guess that really got me started. Oh yeah, this one here. Uh, I put this one in because I hate this telescope. I don't know if you see it's one of these first scopes. Like
Yeah.
it's a little I don't know what size it is, 76 millimeter. It's an f4 spherical mirror,
Mhm.
and you know it just doesn't work. And like if you look at the picture I took there, compare that with the one I took from the 1969 f10 telescope, you can see right away what's going on there. You see that fuzzy image.
Mm.
You can get part of it in focus, and then part of it's going to be out of focus. So that's the spherical aberration from this the spherical mirror. It should be a parabolic mirror. Anyway, I fixed that up a little, but I tell people like, don't buy this scope. Don't buy this scope. And the other thing about this scope and other budget telescopes is quite often they don't even work out of the box sometimes, even if they're not that great. I've looked in the boxes of these telescopes in the store and looked in and seen like the secondaries all cockeyed, you know, like just not in the right position and things like that. And so like I've seen two or three that come out of the box that are just not workable. So you have to intervene to get them to get anything out of them. And so that's one of the reasons I don't recommend this telescope, because the quality control is so poor. Like even if you're willing to put up with the bad optics, like sometimes they're worse than bad, you know.
Mm.
And I've had that the recent example, the recent case I had was an example of that. Here's an interesting little telescope. I always keep my eye on Marketplace, Facebook, or Kijiji,
Mhm.
maybe to see if anything comes up. And I saw this telescope came up. Somebody was selling this telescope, and I could see it was like a good proper, you know, astronomical type telescope from the 60s. And the description of it sounded very promising. It was one owner, so some guy bought this back and you know back in the day, and it had been in the family all that time, and the widow wanted to sell it, and she wasn't asking too much money for it, because one of the things I notice on Marketplace, people have this crazy idea that they bought a telescope for 350 bucks, that somehow they're going to get you to pay 350 bucks for a used telescope, or 300 or whatever. And you know, I've looked at some of those telescopes and had conversations with them, and I say, you know, when you buy a used telescope from somebody, there's no warranty. Like you shouldn't be expecting to get the full amount of your money back, because you say, oh, I bought, you know, I spent all this money on this telescope, and you're trying to get it all back. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You'd be lucky to get half, you know. Anyway, this lady, she wasn't asking too much, you know. She was asking what I thought was a reasonable price. And I called her up and said, look, if it checks out, I'll buy it, you know. And I went over to see her, and I actually had a parts list. I figured out the parts list. I checked everything out against the parts, so everything was there, and it came in a box, a wooden box. And I was like, wow, this is a real classic telescope. You know, it's got the small eyepieces and everything, but had everything worked. So little, you know. And I said, you know, I think she wanted 100, and I said, look, I was looking at, the lens is dirty and it's a little, it's going to need some work. So I offered her 85 and she took it. And I brought it home and cleaned it up. There was a lot of grease and dirt, and I actually had to get a part from another guy in town, the little slow motion control for the altitude there.
Mhm.
That wasn't working right, but that they come a dime a dozen. So I was able to find one. I finally got it back together, and I trained it on the moon, took a picture of the moon, and sent it back to her. I said, "Here, I got your telescope working, and here's a picture of your husband's telescope of the moon." And she was very happy that I was able to get it working. Now that telescope, I ended up donating that to the RASC. So it's in the RASC Telescope Museum in Toronto. And Randall Rosenfeld, I wrote to him and said, "Look, this is not a Canadian telescope, but I think it's a very good example in good condition of the kind of telescope that people like me grew up with." Okay.
Mhm.
And he agreed with me. He said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll." So he took it for the museum, and more or less got my money back from him as a donation. So it's in a good place, and that was a fun experience to play with that. I'm getting near the end. Okay, here's the latest story. So some of you who follow me on Facebook and that will know that a guy contacted me a couple of weeks ago, said he had this telescope he got from Canadian Tire and hadn't been able to see a damn thing through it. What was he doing wrong? And I talked to him on the phone. I said, "Well, you should do this, you should do that." And I gave him a few tips over the phone, the typical things, aligning the finder scope, taking off the lens cap, this and that. And I said, and if that doesn't work, we got an astronomy meeting coming up on Saturday. You can come to the meeting. Now he drove in from Chester, which is about an hour's drive. He came in on Saturday. He said I couldn't get anything out of it still, and I looked at it at the meeting and I couldn't really see anything obvious. And he said, "Well, is there any place I can go and have pay somebody to fix it?" And I said, "Actually, no, there's nobody does that around here. Nobody." And he said, "Well, what am I going to do?" He said, "What am I going to do with that?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "If you trust me, you give it to me. I'll take it home and check it out and I'll let you know. So he gave it to me. That was 2 Saturdays ago. I brought it home, and a half an hour later, I had taken the mirror out of the bottom, and there's the picture of the main mirror as it came out of the telescope. But I think you can see that
Wow.
it's not installed properly. It's supposed to be held down by 3 clips, and there's 2 clips holding down one edge, and it's on top of the third one. And it was like, this is crazy. Like this is the worst mirror installation I have ever seen. So it only took me a few minutes to loosen everything up, and I reseated the mirror so it sat in the telescope cell properly. But of course, then it needed to be collimated, because it had never been properly. So I don't know whether it came from out of the factory like that, or when it got that way during shipping. I told him, I said, either way, to me, it's a warranty case. Like it's a manufacturing defect if it was like that before you got it. And he said, "Well, I don't have the receipt, and it's been a long time." And I said, "Well, I'll do it. I see what I can do with it, and then give it back to you." So now the thing about this telescope, these Celestron 114s, is, see, that telescope, I don't know how long it is, I didn't measure it. That telescope has effective focal length of 1,000 millimeters. Well, that doesn't look like 1,000 millimeter telescope. And the way they get away with it is what they do is it's like a 114 f. I think it's about an f4 mirror. I'm not sure the exact specifications, but what they do is they permanently mount a negative, like a Barlow lens, in the focusing tube, right? It's there all the time. So it basically doubles the focal length or something like that, and makes it an effective 1,000. And that picture on the right there, you can see I took it apart. You can see the focusing tube, and you can see the lens that was screwed in there, and it was in there pretty tight. And I had to use that little tool, that little spanner tool to get it out. That's a very useful tool, by the way, if you want to take apart lenses and things. It doesn't cost very much. I think I paid about $16 on Amazon, and it's adjustable, and you can get in and it helps you unscrew those lenses and things.
That's
So what
cool.
you have to do is you have to take out the whole, you have to take apart the focuser, and then you have to unscrew that lens, and then you put it all back together again without the lens. Then you can collimate it like it's a regular Newtonian, best you can with your laser or whatever have you. And then you take it apart again, put the lens back in, put it back together again, and hope that everything's okay, that it's not messed up by that. And so I did that, and I checked it out, looked okay. I checked it sort of visually, looked okay. And I told the guy, I'm getting an image out of it now. I said, I could probably give it back to you. I said, but let me hang on to it for a couple of days, because I really want to sky test this thing. I don't want to just give it back to you based on looking at my neighbor's chimney, because daytime images it's not a really good test of how good the imaging is. I said, I want to look at the sky. And so Thursday night, it was clear here. I took it out and let it cool down. And the first thing I looked at was the moon. And I said, that's not too bad. I could tell that there was still some aberration, because even with a spherical mirror and a Barlow lens, there's still going to be a bit of spherical aberration. There might be a bit of distortion towards the edge, but at the center of the field, it focused. I could see craters and mountains. I looked at Jupiter. The next thing I looked at Jupiter. Now, mind you, I was using good eyepieces, my own good eyepieces, but I looked at Jupiter, and I could see the Jupiter disk, and I could see 4 moons, and I could even see 2 cloud bands. And I thought, well, if I could see 2 cloud bands on Jupiter with this thing, it's not awful, like. And then I looked at the Orion Nebula, which is not great from the city, but I could see the nebula, and I could resolve the 4 stars of the trapezium. And then I got cold, and I went back. I said, okay, fine. This thing's checking out. I did look at a out of focus star just to make sure the diffraction pattern looked okay. And, I looked at it and said, it's not exact, but I don't think I'm going to get it any closer. I think this is good enough, right? I've done enough. So I brought it inside, and I told him, hey, your telescope is ready to come home. I checked it out. I said, it actually has better images than I expected, which is the truth. I didn't expect them to be that great, but they were better. They're not perfect, but, and so he came, picked it up on Saturday, and we had a look at my neighbor's chimney, and he went away happy. And I actually sold him an eyepiece I had. I said, look, the eyepieces in this thing are pretty much crap. But I said, here, I'm gonna, if you're willing, I said, I'll sell you this. It was a Siboney eyepiece, 30 millimeter focal length, very wide field. And I said, if you use this, then it'll make it easier for you to find stuff, because it's going to have a nice low power wide field view, and then you can zoom in with the other ones. Anyway, he went away happy. So that's my latest little adventure with helping people with telescopes. And that's, so those are the example of the few little adventures I've had with telescopes over the years. And so I'm just gonna, we can just have a discussion now, or about what people think about that kind of work, and budget telescopes, and how you can help people, whatever.
You hit the nail on the head, Dave, for sure. I mean, that's something that, again, a lot of telescopes are sitting in closets all over North America, because people have that one little thing that they can't figure out. I mean, I've had people who couldn't get their finder working, and the tag was still on the battery.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing, right? Or they
Yeah,
had
it's like the 30-second fix.
Right. Yeah.
Like great. They come, they show you, say, oh, did you take this? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's great when you can do that, for sure. Do you want to stop sharing there? We'll
Oh, yeah, sure.
go back to
Right.
all those on the screen. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments or.
Well, somebody did mention, was Alan Ward in Sudbury, apparently, that did the mirror coating.
Yeah. Did somebody have the name?
Yeah, Moonward vacuum coatings, apparently, and it's Alan Ward.
Yeah, there's
That
another
means-
guy in Montreal, Fulham, that
No,
doesn't.
Norman
No, it
Fulham.
must have been Alan. I'd have to go back into my emails,
Yeah.
but it was over 10 years ago. He was very kind to me, I thought. But
Yeah.
yeah, he knew what I was doing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wasn't, it wasn't a commercial thing. It was just like I'm helping somebody out.
Mm.
That can make a big difference sometimes.
It can, if they're a good-hearted soul and they see
Yeah.
that you're doing a good thing, they
Yeah.
can, we have a pretty good community here in Canada, I think.
Yeah.
It's a pretty congenial community, and it's not a huge community, but we're all basically friends, helping each other out the best we can.
hmm I guess that kind of puts a lot of hope in those Astromasters, because now that you've actually taken one apart and looked at it and played with it and got relatively good results out of a telescope in that price category, it might not be
Well,
a bad first telescope if you're able to deal with the Barlow.
well, I was telling the owner, and he said, "Oh, that's great. You could, And I said, you know what? I mean, I said, it's working okay now. I said, but I still wouldn't recommend it. And he said, why not? I said, well, because this is the third one like this that I've had to work on for somebody. They're
Oh,
just not reliable out of the box. Like, people get these things and they have trouble with them, and like, I don't mind fixing people's telescopes, but I mean, I wouldn't tell somebody, hey, yeah, go and buy that telescope, because the quality control is so poor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happens quite a bit. And the first scope one, I mean, it's not the greatest telescope on Earth, but when you add on to it, that they're sometimes put together very sloppily. Like, literally, the one I had to peel the secondary off its little stalk and reattach it, because it was at some weird angle
wow.
before I could get anything out of it. And that's me. I'm a pro, right? But imagine somebody who doesn't know anything about telescopes and they get something like that and they have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if they had an idea, it takes a certain amount of courage to kind of roll up your sleeves and, start taking things apart,
For sure.
Yeah, like your first lens cleaning.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, Celestron, it's kind of a love-hate relationship. They make some really beautiful products, but then they have this whole line of budget telescopes that are very disappointing. And I guess they make money. I mean, I guess what keeps the company afloat is they sell thousands of these budget telescopes, and you see them all on Kijiji in
That's
2
right.
years.
Having said that, Dave, it would be good to your experience, and especially doing what you did, to send them a message about this, because think about all the telescopes that aren't being bought by the second time buyer because of the first
Yeah.
time experience, right?
I don't know. No, I guess I just try to help people out as it goes.
Yeah.
People come to me and I help them out and I do my best, and it just gives me a lot of joy to send people away happy.
For sure.
I don't
But
really
I'm
want
just
to
thinking
take
from their standpoint.
I don't really want to take it on as a cause. Well, see, the other thing I have, the other is them selling budget telescopes and equatorial mounts. Equatorial mounts are no good for the beginner.
Terrible. Terrible.
I mean, they might work if you know how to work them, but most beginners have no idea how the sky moves.
No.
And in order to use an equatorial mount, you have to have some concept of how the sky moves. And even if it's in the manual, nobody really gets it. I've seen telescopes brought to me with equatorial mounts, and they're all like upside down and cockeyed and backwards. Nobody knows how to use them. They shouldn't sell equatorial mounts to beginners. They should.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, for that one for sure. Yeah.
I had a friend who just lives up the street, and it was what was it? It was an Astromaster 150 Newtonian reflector. I think 650. Didn't have the Barlow in it, but it was on an equatorial mount. And I said, "Well, bring it over and leave it with me." I did the same thing. I collimated it and took it out, and I had to mess around with it a bit. I found it a bit awkward. And then I said, well, come back on a nice night and I'll show you what it looks like. And then I showed her another telescope. I had a spotting scope that somebody gave me because I didn't want it anymore. Like it was a Jumel. It wasn't a bad one. And it was just, a spotting scope on an alt azimuth. And I said, well, have a look through this. And she goes, oh, that's a really nice view. She said, well, that's what I was thinking of when I was thinking getting in. So that's what I was going to get, something like that. But my husband bought me this one, and I'm not. And I said, well, look, why don't we just do a straight swap? If you like this one better than the one you have, you can have it, and I'll take yours. I have her telescope now, and she took away the spotting scope.
Oh my goodness.
It was her. I was almost her idea. She talked herself into it. She said, "This is what I." And I just said, "There's no money changed hands. There was no talk of money. It was just like, do you like this one better? Okay, you can have it. It didn't cost me anything."
Yeah. Great if she's a birder too, eh?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Yeah.
Your best telescope is going to be the one that you use.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes you see more through a small telescope because you get it out.
Yeah.
That's why the teleview that's in my little picture there, the teleview gets used quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a 12-inch reflector, Syn Scan Skywatcher in the shed, but I only take it out if I'm going to get serious
Yeah.
about something.
I have a small 72 millimeter refractor that does do the same thing. I got a 12-inch Dob here too that seldom gets out. And the CPC 1100 that gets out even less than that one does. So yeah, it's just they're just too much work. I mean, if you've only got a little bit of time and you want to quickly look at the sky, you're not going to drag out a 12-inch, sky.
I had a nice little 8-inch Dob Discovery, one of those, which I think actually when people say, hey, what should I get? I always say, well, get a 6 or 8-inch Dob.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Bang for a buck. It's intuitive. It's not a whole lot of money. The only problem lately is people say, oh, I want to get a telescope. I don't want to spend too much money. And you say, okay, I've got just the telescope for you. And they say, and I want to be able to take pictures of things.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, sorry, all bets are off.
Yeah.
You just up the ante quite a bit. There's no such thing as a budget entry-level telescope that you can take pictures through. Well, I suppose you could slap your iPhone on it and maybe get a picture of the moon, but you're not going to get pictures of much else,
No.
But that's another thing. They're selling telescopes now with these smartphone adapters as if, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to take pictures with it,
Yeah. No. Doesn't work that way.
No.
For sure.
It's a different hobby, really, if you think about it.
If I have somebody come to me with a couple $100, I usually suggest binoculars. Start there. I won't get them to spend $200 on telescope. I'll say no, don't spend.
Yeah,
Hang on to your money for a bit.
I used to say that too. The only thing about binoculars is that they're hard to share.
That's right.
You have to kind of set them up for your own eyes, and then like once you find something, then if you give your binoculars to your friend, they have to find it, and then hopefully it's set up for their eyes. So it's like with binoculars, it's kind of a solo thing. But it's nice to have a little telescope that you can. I mean, there are some telescopes budget. When I say budget, I mean less than 1,000.
Yeah.
that work well and are intuitive and cause people no grief. I like the little Skywatcher Heritage.
Yeah.
One is not bad, and
the Orion Star Blast is another one, I guess. The 4.5-inch Star Blast.
The Orion Star Blast. Yeah, too bad they. I guess you can get them on the used market now, but they don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
I never looked through one of those, but it sounded like a good scope.
Yeah, sure. I've got one that works pretty good. Like it's a quick grab and go kind of thing.
Parabolic mirror.
Parabolic mirror, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the key. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And well designed, a little stable little mount. You can set them on a tripod too. And
does that one have underneath? Does it have a socket to screw into a tripod leg?
No, it doesn't. That one doesn't.
Okay,
but you can. But there's a guy out there on the internet who built his own, and he had 1/2-inch plywood and used 3 pieces of 2x4 made.
Yeah, you can do things like that. Yeah.
So,
I got a Skywatcher Virtuoso Mini Dob, who's 2015, and it came with this little go-to mount, And the one thing I like about it, it's a tabletop telescope, but you flip it over and it's got a socket to fit on the tripod
Right.
leg.
Yeah.
So I went out and bought tripods legs for it, and I just screw it up, and it's kind of like eye level, and it's
Yeah.
quite nice, and nice little telescope.
Yeah.
But I feel it needs tripods. I don't care for the tabletop ones, because eventually you have to have a table.
That's right.
So,
You do.
you might as well
take
have
one
a
of those,
tripod.
take one of those EQ1 mounts that you don't like either, and throw them out away, and keep the tripod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mount your tabletop to that.
Well, it's yeah, I got all kinds of bits and pieces here. It's almost like I have a telescope shop, but I don't really. But when people come in the house and I say, well, here's this telescope, do you want that instead of what you have?
Yeah.
You know?
You got to see my garage. I got more telescope parts in my garage than you can say.
I went to Canadian Tire about a couple months ago to get something that I needed. I think I needed salt to clean up from the ice storm. And I got my salt, and I was walking out, and there were these Celestron 70 millimeter refractors. They were Astromaster 70 AZs. They were like marked down from $200 to 80. And I looked at it and I said, that's a really good price, And I said, like, the tripod alone and the finder, like, if I bought it just for parts, it's worth it, So I bought one.
Bayou Village is a good spot for that.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we're looking to do a Bino Bud, I guess, at this point.
Geez, I don't know. We got enough time. We got like 4 minutes.
Oh,
No, we got time. We get another.
Oh yeah, we'll put that.
we started
really
late,
only
right?
49 minutes into the show, so.
Oh, it's up to
Okay,
you.
well, anyway, I hope that was what you were hoping.
Absolutely.
looking
Yeah.
forward to.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, perfect, Dave.
Yes, awesome.
Lots of comments here. Okay, do you want to come up with a vinyl bud, Mike?
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
And Paul, do you want to do Rosanna?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we get time. I mean, we're not going anywhere.
Corey, I can read this fast. Binocular target of the week this week by Bino Bud. He should be up there.
Yeah.
It is.
All right. Yes, man. Turn left at Mini Cassiopeia. And that's our target, the Mini Cassiopeia. So this object is an asterism located in the constellation of Draco. Little Cassiopeia, or Kimball 2, is sometimes called the Mini W. Due to its small size and relatively faint stars, this asterism is really the best binocular, or better in a binocular than it is naked eye. So how would I find it in the sky? And again, if it was clear tonight, you go outside at 11 o'clock and orient yourself 20 degrees north-northeast, look up. You'll see the Little Dipper. You'll see Hercules on the rise, and Draco splits the two of them. And you know how we often take a look at the Big Dipper and say if you take the two stars on the pot diagonally and come up, you'll hit M81 and M82? Well, if you do this to the Little Dipper and split them and come down at an angle, you come down to this star in Draco, and guess what? It's right in that area right there. You can't miss it once you're on it. And there's that same star. Look, there's the Mini W right there. In this case, it's an M depending on your orientation, but it's a Mini Cassiopeia.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like? Can't get much more Cassiopeia than that, right? So that's what it looks like if you took a photograph of it. In 10 by 50 binoculars, it stands out pretty good. There's that star in Draco, and just come down from it, and guess what? It'll stand right out in front of you. You'll see the M or W, depending on the orientation. It'll stand right out, and you found yourself Mini Cassiopeia. Compared to the full moon, it's at least the width of the full moon, so it's relatively an easy target. Because the moon's pretty big in a pair of binoculars. And are you ready for this one? What's an astronomer's favorite dance? Of course, the moonwalk. And that's Binocular Target of the Week by Bino Bud.
Another great one, Mike.
Oh, that's good.
Mini Cassiopeia, I like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Let's go with Rosanna's fun fact, Paul.
All right, let me share my screen here, see if I can make this work. Share, and you should see her, and
Right now.
Yep.
And no music.
all right, welcome back, Rosanna, for another absolutely fun fact again. So let's jump right in. So Rosanna writes, hi, Paul. Currently, society is all about new technology with phones, laptops, smartwatches, etc. Everything is consistently being updated and replaced. But today's fun fact reads a little bit like the little engine that could and involves old technology, 50 years old to be exact. Oh, let me find my photo. Where'd it go? There it is. There we go. So back in 1973-74, a little satellite named AMSAT Oscar 7 or AO7, excuse me, was being built in the basement of this house. Oscar's modules were built by ham radio and AMSAT members from all around the world, including Germany, Canada, Australia, and the US, and shipped to this address, although I couldn't find out what that address was. Little Oscar's total power output was at best 14 watts. It had solar panels and low power draw telecommunication equipment that could detect, identify, and convert radio transmission sources, as well as acquiring distance information. It was launched on a Delta 2310 SME rocket on November the 15th, 1974. The version of this rocket had only 3 launches. Oscar's was successful, as it would seem. There were the other 2 launches. There were the other 2 launches, one in 1976 and one in 1981. It was also hitchhiking a ride with the NOAA-4 weather satellite, along with the Spanish-built Intersat. Oscar operated normally and was resounding success. In fact, its Morse code transponder was used as an educational tool by thousands of students worldwide. But then, according to AMSAT's video story in 1981, it suddenly went dead, succumbing to battery failure. However, in the summer of 1982, the Fighting Solidarity and Warclaw, learning that AO7 became periodically functional when its solar panels got enough sunlight to power up the satellite. It was then used to communicate with solidarity activists in Polish cities, and to send messages to the West Satellite communication was invaluable at that time, as the regular telephone network was tapped by the government and shut down when martial law was imposed back in December 1981. Now, ham radios were not much use, as they were easy to track. On the other hand, a satellite link required highly directional antennas, which were impossible to track by the regime. But once again, it would seem that Oscar, the friendly little satellite, truly died and was not heard from again. In 2002, Pat Gowan, G3IOR, a British amateur radio operator, inspired by the history of fighting solidarity, attempted to communicate with AO7, and holy smokes, he detected Oscar's beacon signal on 145.973 megahertz and confirmed it to be operational after 20 years of silence. This resurrection is widely recognized as having occurred on June 21st, 2002. Trying to explain how after a battery failure, the satellite came back to life, the experts feel a very small manufacturing defect in the battery allowed it to fail open. Okay, this statement really needed some explaining, so I asked my brother Rupert to help explain what a fail open meant. So the craft had ceased to operate because its nickel-cadmium battery cells had failed in a typical way, causing a near short circuit and wasting what little power was still generated by the solar panels. But then a cell failed in a highly unusual manner as an open circuit, i.e. they failed open. This broke the power wasting circuit and allowed the system to resume operation directly powered from the solar. And let me see that. There's a photo there. Yeah. So Oscar is alive. So it came back from the dead. Of course, no one really knows for sure. This is a best guess. The system should not have failed and resumed operating. As AMSAT states, no craft has done this before or since. Oscar is full of amazing technology. It can transmit 2.5 kilobytes of data per second, and as a first of its kind, Oscar could command itself with its built-in logic module with no power, base memory, nor human intervention. This little satellite also has a list of firsts. It's the first satellite to satellite relay through AO6. Early demonstrations of low-budget medical data relay and Doppler location of ground transmitters for search and rescue operations were carried out using this satellite. The Mode B transponder was the first using HELAPS, which is high efficiency linear amplification by parametric synthesis technology developed by Dr. Carl Meisner as part of his PhD. And it was the first to fly a battery charge regulator. We'll zoom that in. There we go. A simple but ingenious set of 4 magnets allowed Oscar to lock onto the lines of the Earth's magnetic field. The satellite stay is SSO, Sun Synchronous Orbit, at 900 miles out. The key characteristics of the SSO is that the satellite always passes over a specific location at the same local time, which translates to consistent lighting conditions. The Sun Synchronous Orbit is the green circle. Another way to look at the orbit, SSO orbit, is a perpendicular oval. The absolute topper to this story, Oscar, is still communicating with Earth. The last update I could find was April the 10th, and it's the 4th row down. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's the communications there, AL91. According to Amstat, Oscar will likely outlive all of us. So when you think about all the space junk out there, at least you know of a 50-year-old satellite that is still hanging on. So all the space junk. 50 years ago when I went into space, there was actually space. And that's this week's.
That's fun fact.
Hey, thank you so much, Rosanna. An absolute fun fact
That's
story
crazy.
yet again.
That's crazy. Little things don't, little satellite that could.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what they put out there. And for all the things and all the time that we assume that it's going to be out there, it seems to outlast. Like almost all of those satellites and all those telescopes they send out seem to way outlast where they should. So interesting.
Built like a 57 Chevy, not like a 1980s K car.
Yeah, orbiters, rovers, I mean, all of them. Look at the Voyagers out there, you know, for 50 years now, right? Almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
So incredible. Thank you, Rosanna.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's go quickly to some photos because we're going to wrap up here pretty quick. Let me get my photos open here. I'm going to do a little bit of this, and I'm going to do a little bit of this. Share screen. Let's see this one. Yeah, photo up there. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we've got these from David Samard. David sent in some captures of the sun. We got another, there is an announcement right now that there's maybe a G2 level storm coming through on about Wednesday, because one of these actually released there's a large filament that broke off today, and one from, I guess, yesterday. So we'll be watching that, but these are some nice captures from Dave. Thanks, Dave. Another one from the moonshot from him as well.
Oh, nice.
And he's got some sea star pictures here. So this is M109.
I caught that quite well. 58 minutes.
M81, M82, I believe.
Yep.
Here's an NGC 5466, a nice globular cluster. I believe we got M3 here. That's a really bright glob. That's a real good target. And that's probably right next to Hercules cluster, right? 13. I mean, as far as a nice cluster to observe.
Mhm.
Here's his M100. And I think I'm just about to the end of Dave's here. Yeah, I think I am at the end of Dave's. So thank you for those, Dave. And Mark Ficken, this one here, another 90 minutes, he said, added to my Messier 51, the Whirlpool Galaxy, and under a full moon, he says. So, wow, not bad.
Yeah, was that S30, is it? Yeah.
That's S30, yeah.
Yeah, look at that.
Well done. And another Galaxy goodies is what needs more editing time and more time for data. Imaged here in Bronte, the Grand Design Galaxy M101, the Pinwheel Galaxy. This was the accumulation of two different nights, denoised in the C star and using the Deep Sky Stacker. Thanks for those, Mark.
Yeah, those wide field views are kind of nice, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Lots of stuff in there. And this one he sent in too. we get where you are there, Mark. It's same thing happening with us this week as well. So
Yeah, Mike and I were talking about that earlier.
the cloud field. All right, move on to Kathy Adams. Nice picture here of M63, known as the Sunflower Galaxy. It's located 27 million light years away in the constellation of Canis Venatici. Only 2 hours of integration time. If we ever see a clear night again, she says, I'm going to get more data to work with. And this is from the Dwarf 3 telescope. So another nice image.
Yeah,
It's amazing work.
it's good.
Right. I'll move on here to Mr. Powell's pictures of the moon this week. So, Mike, this is your capture, I guess, from on the 6th. So
Yeah, it would have been nice to get a whole sequence through the full moon, but of course, weather was on our side.
there's last Sunday night. Then we got the 9th here. You can see the phases of the moon changing, no? And then the 10th.
So, Mike, question for you.
Yep.
How are you stacking a lot of these to get the color?
40 frames.
Okay.
So 40 frames on my DSLR, use a 600 millimeter lens. Bring it in, center it all in pip,
Yeah.
and then put them into auto stacker, stack them, pick the best 10%.
Yeah.
Then I pull it into GIMP and do the saturation stretch from there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's working well. You're getting some nice colors out of those.
It's coming up. It's hard to figure out what the actual colors are supposed to be because there's so many variations online that you don't know which color you want to aim for.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
By just stretching the saturation, I'm getting the colors that the camera's pulling out. So
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't think that there is color in the moon, right?
yeah. They call it the mineral look, I guess, or something like that.
Mineral moon. Awesome. All right. Gonna go to we're up next now. Bruce Elkhorn's up next. So here's some captures he had of solar eclipse, of course. Partial solar eclipse. coming
Oh,
through.
yes.
Well,
Yes.
nice.
Yeah, there's a nice
Very
capture.
nice.
And I particularly like this one here. Here it is.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Another capture of it here.
You know, I tell you, those things with the clouds, I welcome the clouds when you can get a shot like that.
like that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. They're beautiful.
Thanks for those, Bruce. He said captured from the parking lot and at KVHS in Quispamsis.
Well,
Cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Right, and I'm gonna step from there to this one here, also from Bruce. I'm gonna bleed
Sure.
it the other night.
yeah.
You get the earth
And
shine
Paul,
there.
yeah, I'm gonna skip back here to this. Yeah, that there's shine in there as well. So yeah, Paul, I was just gonna quickly mention your go here.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so you want to take 60 seconds to talk about that?
Okay, sure. Besides taking pictures of the night sky, I take pictures of the daytime too. And I've been doing that for quite a little while. And the gal that you see on that photo, her name is Kate Taddick. And she and I were both on the same photography challenge show put on by Mark Hemmings and Matt Brown. I was on season 1, she was on season 2. And so one day she came, I was out in Hampton, Canada today, just taking some photos around for the celebration. And then she comes up and taps me on the shoulder. She says, "Are you that guy from Photography Challenge on season 1?" I said, "Yeah." And she told me who she was, and we just started chatting. And then she's got a nice studio in her house. She's really a great photographer. And so we've shot a couple of things together. And then we just decided to do a podcast. And so the podcast is going to be called, as you see down there, called Snapshots and Stories. And what that is, it's a conversation all about photography. So we'll be talking about, photos and bringing guests on about their photography and all that stuff. And we've got people lined up from all over the place to come in and have chats with us. And we'll talk a little bit about gear and a little bit about settings for the beginners, maybe having struggling. We get people to send in some photos and we can reimagine them together. So maybe if there's a cropping thing that could have made it look better, or they may say, I can't seem to get this to work or that to work. So it's going to be about stuff like that, but it's a really relaxed, laid back, non-judgmental, fun place to just talk about photography. It aired last week, and it's going to be on Facebook and YouTube on 7 o'clock on Tuesday nights. For the time being, it's going to be recorded until we get all the technical bugs worked out, so that we don't trip and fall live. And so we
What's
get
wrong with
that
that?
done. Yeah, I kind of like
What
it,
are,
but I'm
what
not
are you
sure.
trying to say, Paul?
I don't know. Anyway, I enjoy that stuff, but anyway, because I'm sitting here and I have to do all that stuff too, like Chris does, and then still try to host and talk and do all that. I've got some catching up to Chris to do to be able to pull that off. But anyway, so that's what it's all about. Snapshots and stories. Our Facebook page is up and running. I posted on my Facebook page and a bunch of others for now. I am creating an actual Facebook page for this, and I've got a YouTube channel already made for this, and I'm just getting the final little bugs worked out on that. And and that's basically what it's all about. So it's just a show for photographers to talk about photography.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Stories. Yeah. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Let us know about getting the bugs worked out. Maybe we can transfer some over.
Yeah, maybe we can pick up some hints from you.
Yeah, I got some stuff I need to know from Chris, and I'm sure we can talk.
Oh, what not to do. Yeah. All right. So if you have any photos that you'd like to send in, please send them in to astronomybythebay@gmail.com. We'll do our best to get them up on our next broadcast. And just a real quick look at what's coming up this week. Well, we got a waning gibbous moon. The moon is going to lead Antares through the sky on Wednesday morning at 1 a.m. Atlantic time. There it is rising in the east. So the moon leads Antares on that day, and then the following day, Antares leads the moon the next morning. So this is looking east at Thursday at 1:30 a.m. Atlantic time. So watch for those two activities. How big is Antares? Well, where is Antares? Is actually in the constellation of Scorpius. Scorpius has a hard time clearing the horizon for us where we are, but it is quite visible, and this star is very noticeable for sure. And how big is Antares? Well, here it is. Antares has a diameter between 835 million to 1.14 billion kilometers in size. Now, if Antares was placed in the center of our solar system, its outer surface would lie between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter out in the asteroid belt. So here's us, Sol, and this is Antares. So amazing. Think about that. And I think we're just about at the end of that part. Maybe, well, hang on, a couple more slides to show here. Yes, we have Lisa's lookup. So Lisa Fanning sends this chart off to me every month, and I'm very happy to display it. Lisa has this on her own page. It's Lisa's Lookup Astronomy and More. So she puts out the event, and she puts out the date of the event and the peak time for the event in Eastern time, and then seeing tools. What do you need? Naked eye, binoculars, or a telescope? She lists them all down here. So you can find Lisa at Ruby Moonbeams on Instagram, Mastodon, Facebook, Threads, and now on Blue Sky. So thank you, Lisa. And here's our local calendar for the April-May calendar for St. John Astronomy Club and Rask NB. Kurt Nason puts this together for us. Does a great job for the 6 weeks here. I think he just sent out the newest one. So this is April 6th, right down to May 17th. So anything that's happening throughout the days of those 6 weeks, they're listed here. So, and we are going to talk about where is that? May the 3rd, Astronomy Day. I'll just briefly talk about that. Mike, Paul, I, and Kurt are going to be offering a one-day workshop on astronomy. And we'll be talking about that. I'll post up on my Facebook page on that particular day on May 3rd. It's at the Rockwood Park Interpretive Center, same place where we have our monthly meetings. So we'll let that go for now. I just need a second here to sign out of that part. I need a second to sign out of this part. And then I need to bring this up. I'm almost ready. Cool. That's all there is. Anyway, so that's our show for this evening. Hope you enjoyed the program. Special thanks goes out to Dave Chapman for joining us tonight. Excellent talk this evening, Dave. Thank you very much.
Dave.
Of course, you're welcome to back and you have an open invitation to join us anytime. love to catch up on other things that are happening. Okay, our special thanks too goes out to Rosanna for another interesting fun fact. Thank you, Rosanna, for that. And special thanks to all of you who share our program with your friends and family. Remember too, we do love getting your photos, so send them in to astronomybythebay@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to put them up on the next broadcast. And so until next week, wishing you clear skies, especially for this week coming up, because it doesn't look really good, but we'll try for some. I'd like to say, guys, open your eyes to view the skies and keep your scopes pointed up.
What is that?
Ready? And we'll sign out this way. I think. We might sign out this way.